Shabbat Shalom. In the current mess in Israel, there is this very powerful current and thread of thinking that's been part of the divisiveness and everything that's been happening for the last really 4 or 5 years, coming out of the complicated Ashkenazi and Sephardi relations, where a lot of Mizrahi and Sephardi Israelis think, well, all of these protests, this is just coming because of the Ashkenazim trying to hold on to the last vestiges of their power, specifically in the High Court. And they said, you kept us out of power for 7 decades, and now it's our turn, they say. When they came to Israel, the Moroccans and all the other Sephardi Jews, they felt the Ashkenazim treated them as lesser, and now they're saying it's our turn, and all these protests, just because you're holding on to power, you're trying to hold on to an Ashkenazi leadership. So in our parsha this week there is a line, amidst all the other laws, where it says, be sure not to neglect the Levi family amongst you. Why the Levite family? Because all the other tribes, they got a portion, their own piece of land, everyone, but not the Levites. And they were a minority group. They had to live amongst the others. They didn't have their own land. And they depended on receiving offerings from all the other tribes. And so, yes, they got to be the spiritual leaders and serve in the temple, but they didn't have the same financial position as the others. And so the French commentator Chizguni says, it says in that verse, as long as you live in the land, you have to take care of the Levite. And he says, well, once they were in exile, the Levites were the same as everybody. They were all oppressed the same, so they didn't have to worry about it. But while they were in the land, they had to make sure not to neglect the Levite. And actually in the Hebrew, the command is even more powerful. It's not saying do not neglect, it's saying do not abandon the Levi. Do not abandon them because you think, well, their needs aren't my needs. And don't neglect them because you think, well, they've got their lofty position and that's good for them. And really, this is so often the Torah has this message over and over. Don't neglect, but really don't abandon those people who are vulnerable. The widow, the orphan, the stranger. Because it knows how easy it is to turn away from other human beings and their needs, and then really to abandon them and think, well, it's not my job to take care of them. Or even worse, think they're not human. And in our world, we see this, maybe a way we can apply it. Do not abandon those who you think differently than you. Do not abandon those who believe differently. Do not abandon those who are of a different tribe. So in this case of Israel, on one hand, there's truth to all those perceived injustices. And it's become clear, and there are many in Israeli society who are saying, well, even among the Ashkenazi who've been ruling the country, maybe they could have done a better job of bringing the Mizrahi and Sephardi into power. They could have done a better job of opening the doors and caring for them. On the other hand, now it's the Sephardim who are abandoning the Ashkenazim, and out of a sense of vengeance, it's just the same thing continuing all over again. And then all sides just end up abandoning each other, and there's no mutual understanding. And so the Torah understands how easily this happens, and you have to push people. Don't abandon the people who are thinking differently than you. And this is so much of what the Torah does. As we see from its very beginning in the book of Genesis, how the way we understand that story of the eating of the apple is that every single human being has a good side and a not so good side. And the good side is a part of us that wants to live in harmony with others. And the not so good side is a side that feels injustice and perceived other people are harming them and therefore creates suffering, abandons their fellows, feels they're no longer human. And so the whole story of the Torah in some ways is a story of trying to force people into that higher self, of trying to live in harmony. Because what's the opposite of abandoning people? It's what the Torah tells us about our fellow Jews. Kol Yisrael arevim ze bazeh. All of Israel support one another. As the Baal Shem Tov says, because we're the same limbs of the same body, all the Jewish people. And when you do that, when you have empathy and compassion, and even though you might feel that they wronged you, you don't abandon your fellow. When you see the spark of God in other human beings, then you can truly bring peace and justice to our world. Shabbat Shalom.